anyone interested in making lots of money from the carbon economy, the quickest way to make it is to have someone come around and ask, can they put a bunch of ugly Mercedes-Benz logos on the hills around you? Well, they came to our neighbourhood and signed up a bunch of half the farmers in the district and told them not to tell anyone. 2008. And so we've discovered those blue dots are turbines. There are to be 330 wind turbines. And that red dot up there in the middle, that's our property. We don't have a single turbine, but we can see them all. And it's funny how your attitude to these things changes when you've got some of them on your place. And if you haven't, you feel dreadfully aggrieved and possibly a cancer victim just thinking about what it's going to do. Anyway, I only mention this to let you know that the carbon economy is just like life. There are winners and there are losers. That's in, we're between Wellington and Mudgee. There are 900 turbines going up in that district. We'll be the largest wind factory in the world. I'm going to charge people admission to come and stand on our beautiful property and admire the vast horizons of these things. We've been offered the opportunity to have a substation on our grid, a hectare. They're going to buy a hectare. We're not sure we want to be interested. Basically, I've got a few things to point out to you. One, the carbon farming initiative is a potential source of revenue. It's a fairly tightly regulated structure of things that basically they assume that everyone's a crook. And they build a system of fail-safes which only an administrator could build. A beautiful bureaucratic structure. What we start off with is that this tick here, recognised offsets entity, you have to be investigated to see if you're a fit and proper person. And it might surprise you to know that we've been declared fit and proper. That would surprise a few. You then seek an eligible project, and you do the project, and you're audited, and you get a review by the Clean Energy Regulator and a certificate of entitlement, which you can then draw upon to sell that unit in the marketplace. And there are various companies, and right now there is huge demand for Australian farm carbon credits. And do you think we've got any to sell? No. But that's life. It's a structured process. I'll just run through it quickly. The Australian Federal Police investigated us and found nothing. Says something about them. Well, I've got lots of library books that I haven't returned. So the ACCC check you out. Have you ever been bankrupt or sold dodgy things out of a car boot? And at the same time, you apply for and they give you an account in the National Registry, and that's where the credits are issued. So you get the right to receive what you've earned. It's very charitable of them. And the next thing you need is to be declared a recognised offset entity. The entity is a word that a bureaucrat uses to describe any living form that can do a transaction, be it a corporation, an association, or an individual. And then you need a methodology. A methodology is a means of sequestering carbon or in some way avoiding emitting. And it's a document that has been developed by painstaking effort. I'm saying this because we're involved in one. It's a long journey, but you need to have. Basically, it describes the scope of the activities, technologies and management practices that you're going to use to achieve the savings. You apply for a project based on the fact that you've got a methodology. And these methodologies are hanging on a wall. You can just come and pick them up. They're public. They're developed by the blood, sweat, tears and dollars of individuals and companies wanting to provide a methodology, but they're free to be used by anyone. Then you do your project, and that could be a soil carbon project or a forestry project. There are various ones. And you fulfill the structures of the methodology. You just have to follow it. It's like a recipe. And you've got to keep your records. Farmers are good at keeping records. I mean, these guys can chop your hands off if you don't keep records. They're serious administrators. Chop your hands off is a term that they use. Project notification means something's gone wrong. And then you submit your audit reports and your calculations and apply for credits. And the Clean Energy Regulator, who sounds like Big Brother on TV, housemates to the diary room. He or she decides if you have been a good boy or girl and done everything and dotted your I's and crossed your T's, and then you receive a certificate of entitlement. And you're home free. That's the process. Now, it doesn't sound as jumbled as that when you sit down and read through it. It sounds even more dire. But it's important that you understand there's been a lot of compost spoken about this process. They're not good compost either. For instance, one of the big fears people have is a bloody great drought coming through and wiping out their carbon, or a bushfire. Well, Mark Dreyfus, who's the minister in charge of getting people interested in this, has been at pains to tell us you don't have to pay it back. That's the first principle. you may have to replace it. By that, I mean, if you get a fire in a forest, the fire has got to actually kill the trees. And that's a fairly severe fire, as far as fires go. And they would expect you to plant to replace the dead trees. And the same with if you lost 0.5% of carbon, they would consider the situation, and you would then be obliged to continue those processes that are building the carbon, but you couldn't be paid for that 0.5% until you've recovered it, and then the payment can continue. So the process is not a punishing. They've also put aside a 5% buffer to cover losses in many situations. There are buffer pools. There are insurance products that are being developed. Our methodology uses a buffer that is so generous that it can almost remove the permanence liability. And so there are all sorts of ways, and the methodologies, as we're putting them together, people are developing innovative ways of removing the problems. This is just to tell you, this is a statement from the department that they're working through a number of methodologies with industry, that's us, and one of them is soil carbon. And these methodologies are being rolled out. So they are very interested in soil carbon. There's our draft methodology. And this is what a methodology looks like. I was enumerate at school. I'm still enumerate, but we have to learn to read Greek and do all sorts of mathematical equations. There are at least 5 solutions. Look at that, enumerate, 5. 5 solutions. The department has its own. Well, Terry McCosker, famous for his statement of rivers of cash. Terry's got a measurement solution. The measurement solution is the key. Alex McBratney's working on a solution. Another scientist that we can't name, it's all very cloak and dagger. It has a solution. Both sides of politics. You'll have noticed that Greg Hunt refers to soil carbons. They're plural. He loves it so much he thinks there should be more of it. And Tony is a big fan of soil carbon. So he can't be such a bad bloke after all. These are the methodologies that are available already: landfill gas, piggery manure, methane flaring, savanna burning. That's restricted to a very thin strip of land up in northern Australia, and the methodology for quantifying carbon sequestration by permanent environmental plantings of native species using the CFI reforestation modelling tool. It's really the only thing that's generally applicable. There are 15 other myths coming down the constipated pipeline, and 36 projects following closely. The planting method is a doddle. there's a chap who's speaking at our conference up in Queensland at Theodore has determined that he gets more production from a paddock that has 40% crown cover of trees than he gets from a paddock the same size, completely bare of trees. So 40%, you'd imagine giving up that much space would damage your production, but he gets higher production. Just some of the rules: you can't clear the piece of soil and say, we're going to plant a forest. You can't take a forest out to put a forest in. It has to be cleared for 5 years. Direct planting or seeding, you can take your firewood, but that's about all the harvesting. The plants have to be native to the area. You need crown cover of at least 20%. That's not too difficult. A height of at least 2 metres. You've got to leave that invasive scrub. And the smallest block that can be enrolled is tiny sliver, 0.2 hectare. The government have calculators. Goddamn government calculators. You wrestle with them. We actually offer a service giving people some idea of what they could do with a certain size project. And this is one up near Substation. Not surprisingly, some cotton growers are wondering what the return would be if they turned the cotton fields back home into forest. And they were interested in what the dollar would be. And here's an example. 917 hectare block. Tons of CO2, 6,000 in the first 5 years. Very slow uptake, but it kicks on from there. What we've done, they're tons that you multiply them by the dollar figure that you can get in the marketplace. $10, $20. It's hard to predict what the price will be, but that's a significant amount of money. The government expects that you would plant a significant number of seedlings in order to have a buffer for losses. I determined that the odds of a fire burning a private forest in eastern Australia are about 38 to 1. Which is a long shot. Ruffy at Ramwick. There's some dollars. You can't assume that you will get 30 years. 30 years is the maximum, but they have to allow, to give you permission to have another crediting period. So you have 5-year crediting periods. The key to profitability is cost management. Fencing, planting, these things have to be taken into account. We're talking long term here, 30, 40, 50 years. And of course, you have an obligation under this methodology to retain that forest as it is for 100 years. We've got a small project. That's a wildlife corridor, 50 metres wide. Basically, it's 20 hectares all up. And we're really dipping our toe in the water to experience the process so that we can speak about it with some authority. And this gives you an idea. It's a very small amount of land and a small amount of money. But we were going to do the wildlife corridor anyway because it connects remnant vegetation and it could do quite a good deal for the biodiversity. Of course, you're not supposed to propose anything that you were going to do anyway, so I'd expect you all to keep that to yourself in case Big Brother comes. And if I was doing 200 hectares, I'm looking at, well, we'll say it's $25 a tonne, which is generous. But I think Big Brother should be generous. There's significant money when you move to larger spaces. The reason we're not mad, keen, forest everywhere people, we just think that this methodology is available and it's has value improving biodiversity and improving productivity, and can be used as a means to get experience with the carbon farming initiative. There is a vast amount of money sloshing around for farmers, and very few farmers know about it. The people on the inside know, and you've got to figure out how to get on the inside. And industry associations, industry groups, we've got a neighbour who got 400,000 for a research project, and they very diligently applied for it. There's pots of money, carbon farming futures, 429 million for research development and on-farm trials and extension. The Biodiversity Fund, almost $1 billion. And that's to support land managers storing carbon. There's $250 million to buy, yes. That's right. It's the two things were designed to work together. You can get a grant and earn credits. The 250 million has been put aside to buy soil carbon credits because we won't immediately have access to the European market, the Kyoto market. Price expectations. There is one important factor you need to be aware of, and that is there are two markets. One market is called the compliance market. That's for the big emitters who have to shell out to bring down their carbon footprint, to cover their carbon footprint. Now they want the lowest price possible. And so they will buy $2.50, $1.75. The other market is the voluntary market. And these people want to cover their footprint, but they want to do it because they are concerned about climate change. They have a market, a customer base that are concerned about climate change, and they want to claim they are carbon neutral. And big companies, Qantas, the Crown Casino Group, follow this path. We call a voluntary credit is charismatic because it has environmental or social co-benefits. A farm credit is charismatic. People want to help the farmers. People have a special place in their heart for Aussie farmers. And we believe we've got a powerful, charismatic product to sell. The price for the voluntary market ranges from $1 a tonne to $100 a tonne. That means you can leverage buyer emotion. It's brand marketing. And basically, it's the place where you'll get the best dollars. We have recently, they passed the legislation yesterday to link our market to the European market, which removes the floor price assurance that we had. This isn't a disaster because analysts expect by 2015, and none of us will have any soil carbon to sell before 2015, because you can only start with what you start with. They believe that it'll be between $10 and $20 a tonne. The European Commission are actually working on a project to force the price up, and they expect that the price will be somewhere in the vicinity of $10 to $20. And that's the compliance price. So hopefully, and here's talking about companies wishing to go carbon neutral. This is this magnificent truck is the 11th unit in a fleet known as Transforce Bulk Haulage, which is, we were privileged to assist the Transforce to become the first carbon neutral bulk haulage fleet on the planet. And there's the gentleman showing the auditor around when we were being inspected. And basically, the process was a wonderful exercise in patience. And we were patient. Our recommendation, yes, hello, that sweet-looking young girl over there.
But with the credits, they can be banked. So they can be part of your succession plan. They can be part of, instead of putting money in deposits, in those monetary deposit things, you could have a flow of carbon credits over a 10, 20, 25-year period of time that you buy and sell as the price of carbon changes.
The truck that you see on the screen will be parked outside the Dubbo Civic Centre, full of compost, and it's the lucky door prize for the function. We better not give away his truck. These guys genuinely love their trucks. We advise farmers to have a carbon farming initiative strategy, build a portfolio, a toe in the water with strategic plantings. Don't go overboard, something that can't hurt you, but teaches you how to deal with these bureaucrats. And then something easy, like methane reduction from their breeding strains of cattle that reach market weight a lot faster. And you get a credit for that period in which the cow's not belching, because it's a bun. It's chopped beef on a bun. We don't tell the cows that. A precision application of fertiliser. Joel, you'll be interested to know that the people are getting credits for using less fertiliser. And they're developing fertilisers with substances around them that trigger the activity of the fertiliser when certain conditions apply. And you will get higher returns from a portfolio, higher prices for charismatic units, and higher returns for higher volumes measured. Now, that last one, we have a dispute with the world of pure science. Basically, the many hours of work done to study our soil carbon performance leaves us with a small amount, at best half a tonne, a hectare a year. But then we have farmers. This is David Brewer of Temple Brewer Vineyards, 2% increase in soil carbon levels in 10 years. Cam Banks from Uralla is similar, 10 tonnes of CO2. David Marsh, 2.5%. Craig Carter, 2% in 3 years. So the figure 2% in 10 years, cold Zeiss easily does that. Now what we have is farmers who we would call high performance carbon farmers, when they apply themselves, can move the needle, and significantly over 10 years. Now, there's Terry McCosker with a figure. Pardon? I don't know. It's a new business. I think I got it from you, but anyway, we'll pretend that wasn't there. Cam McKellar, who in 2008 had an increase of 0.59%. I've got the chart. And it was a bouncy. And which is why we like to measure it over 10 years, because all the variations disappear with the trend. But the Morettis had a similar bounce. But the question that isn't asked is why? These things are dismissed as anecdotal. But if I was Julius Sumner Miller, some of you might remember him. Why is it so? He's a physicist. We need to resolve this in a cooperative manner. Other things that are happening that we should just tell you, we're involved in a consultation preparing to take on the Kyoto forces on Article 3.4 and the 100 years. That is being addressed. This is another issue. Australian carbon credit units are designated financial instrument. Anyone speaking from a podium like this and giving advice, or who is deemed to be giving advice, is covered by the Australian Financial Services legislation and have to be licensed. We are licensed. It's just something to be aware of, because the ACCC or ATSEC will be looking for someone to demonstrate their power. And then, of course, we have Carbon Farming Week. You've got one of those waiting for you there. And a little advertisement for the conference. The B double full of compost has got to be a killer. We have a speaker coming to us from the Canadian market, Alberta. There's an active soil carbon market there. We've got Shane Joyce, some of you may have heard him speak. He's the gentleman who's getting increased production with more tree cover. We've got monsters from the deep, people from the market, the Sydney people who wear suits, sharp as a rat, flash as a rat with a gold tooth. But they're coming up to tell us all how to avoid being eaten by sharks while swimming with them. And Louise has done a fantastic job of taming them. So finally, about us, we're fundamentally a company whose role is to develop opportunities for farmers to have access to carbon markets and safe access, secure access. So we provide these sort of services, estimations on potential returns, management of a plantings project, guidance to carbon neutrality, purchasing offsets, advice on project feasibility. Basically, we will hold your hand, be responsible, and warn you when you're in danger. And that's basically because we've been living with danger for 7 years. I'd like to finish by thanking and congratulating and making a special statement of affection for Rhonda and Bill. They're an exemplary couple. Their lives express the values that we hold close, and you've supported us when a lot of people wouldn't. So you're either crazy or visionary. 10 years is the magic number, 10,000 hours. That's what it takes to make an expert of the highest order. And thank you. And lastly, thank you to my wife for being so patient and always filling in the gaps when I'm speaking.
Thank you, Michael. You are always not only an informative speaker, but the most entertaining speaker. And what I get is, it's like he does it as though it's not funny. It just comes out. It's such dry humour. Oops, I got my serviette tucked in. But it's, I appreciate Louisa and Michael for coming down because, you know, if this is going to happen, we need to know. We need to know how we're going to trade, if we're going to make money from it, how to do it, how to avoid the sharks, how to swim with them and not get eaten by them. It's a good one. And that information is invaluable. Louisa, would you like to say a word?
Just a couple of the things concerning the compost side and the link between the trade and the nitrous oxide. So that where you guys and the compostable people, you know, it's sort of fit. I have a very strong gut feeling that the soil carbon working group, so within the government, they have several groups working on different forms of offsets at the moment. And they're very aware that the soil carbon world is very strong on wanting a soil carbon offset. And because compost is feelable, you know, it's understandable. You've got you know, regulations. You've been in the business a long time, and just watching who they're giving money to at the moment, I have a very strong gut feel that their soil carbon unit will have something to do with compost. There you go. So now you can keep me to that in the next, 6 to 12 months. But I think that this is an area, because it's easier. They can't see the microbes and things like that. They definitely went on the physical and chemical side. Hardly any microbiologists in the scientific world. We have to rely on our astrophysicists, which is interesting. That's number one. And number two, the nitrous oxide opportunity is good for suppliers of things like biology, because if you can make the link between reduction in your fertiliser, that is your MAP and DAP and those ones, if you reduce those and maintain the yield, they're very, very strong on this thing about, okay, if you blokes reckon you can do this thing and that, but you're going to have to maintain the yields. We can't have these decreasing yields. So, but using less MAP and DAP leads to less use of, less nitrous oxide going up in the air. For every tonne of nitrous oxide that doesn't go up in the air, you can claim a credit. Not yet, because that methodology hasn't gone through. But it's coming. Hey, yeah, hurry it up. Exactly. And the only trouble with all of that is that all the folk who have done it already are in a difficult position if you're already, cut down on your MAP and DAP. So the two things, compost quite probably is what they're looking at for the soil carbon. And number two, for your new business, you want to get a hold of the information on, what you can, how much less nitrous oxide can go up in the air. Thank you.